Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner for the SCEA's Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves COOL, and you can find out everything you ever wanted to know about us right here on this website, cool.us. That's CEWL.us. And I also want to say thanks to the National Education Association and the South Carolina Education Association for supporting the work at COOL. And if you are interested in joining our movement, you can join the SCEA right here at jointhescea.org. And right now you can join and not pay any dues until September in our early enrollment period. So it's a great time for you to join our movement, to learn what we do at the SCEA, and also learn about the National Education Association. When you join the SCEA, you're also joining the NEA and your local affiliate as well. So it's a three-tiered membership all in one. And NEA has some incredible resources, including what we're going to be sharing tonight. So June is Pride Month, and I want to say Happy Pride Month to everybody. I hope celebrating by just rejoicing in the diversity that we have, and really celebrating love and inclusion, and it's a great time to just honor that and celebrate that pride, and so with that in mind, we reached out to Anthony Brisson. Anthony is going to be our guest tonight. He has over 15 years of experience in the field of education as a former high school English teacher, adjunct college professor, and education consultant. He moved to Washington, D.C. because he wanted to have a direct impact on public education nationally to help advance equity in education, particularly for LGBTQ plus educators and students. He's trained thousands of educators on various racial and social justice topics, such as implicit bias, race-class narrative, advancing racial justice, LGBTQ plus and intersectional identities, diversity, bullying and sexual harassment, cultural competence, and others. He has a strong background in developing and maintaining relationships with national and governmental agencies, public speaking, training, and moderating panel discussions. He currently manages over 50 trainers nationwide and serves as the lead for all LGBTQ plus issues for the National Education Association. Anthony oversees and manages 5 different training cadres, serves on multiple internal groups for curriculum design, and helps oversee LGBTQ plus partnerships and program implementation for NEA state and local affiliates. So here he is. Please welcome Anthony Brisson. How are you doing tonight, Anthony?
I'm well, Todd. Thank you so much for that great introduction. Sometimes it's so weird to hear everything talked back at you of what you've done, because you just get so involved into the work and you just continue to do it. So thank you, and I'm so excited to be here. And like you said, Happy Pride.
Yeah, I know you've had a long day, so I appreciate you taking some extra time out of your day to talk with us tonight about how we can better advocate for LGBTQ plus educators. I think, so from my first question for you is, when we look at this country, I'm sure there's certain states where advocating is a little bit easier and a little bit safer. Here in South Carolina, I know a lot of educators, LGBTQ plus educators, feel a little bit intimidated, and there's a culture of fear. And this is just due to who's in leadership positions and just sort of the culture here. Can you help folks who are in this state and maybe states like it? What are some things that they can do, or some resources they can go to help them feel a little bit more confident and give them a little bit better reassurance moving forward?
Absolutely. So I always like to start off with, right now we're in an inversion of our legal landscape, right? We are going from very strong federal protections as a backdrop for anti-LGBTQ state laws to now attacks by our federal government. right? So now what we really need to do is look to state laws, local policies, and individual enforcements of our rights. And so when I look at the work that we lead here at NEA at the national level, being the lead of LGBTQ issues nationwide, we know that that's going to be different from state to state, right? We know that federal judgments are always going to come down, and we're always going to either challenge them or be in support of them. As we know, when thinking about the Bostock rights around Title VII, the federal judge in Texas just ruled that the interpretation of Bostock does not really protect beyond sexual orientation. But when we think about the ways that we can approach this, we do it in a four-prong approach. And I think it's very imperative that people look at the different ways that we can attack, whether it's anti-LGBTQ policies, laws, or just individuals that are putting out false information about the LGBTQ community. The first one is legal. You really need to look at what we're doing, or what our states could be doing, or even what our locals could be doing at the local or city levels, right? Because if you have bad federal laws, you need to look at your state laws. If you then have state laws that are in alignment with those bad federal laws, you need to now look at the local level, right? You need to look at your school boards. You need to look at what your school policies are, even down into your classroom and what you're allowed to be able to teach. So at the legal level, look at the lawsuits, look at the amicus briefs that you can file along with some of these negative lawsuits, looking at your Know Your Rights guides, and the government relation context that you have, right? You in many of these instances that we're working in and for is working with your general counsel at your state level. These are the individuals that are going to be the ones that will file lawsuits against these anti-LGBTQ policies and laws, or they're going to be the ones that are going to support it. So sure, we have members of Congress. We have members of Congress at our state level, right? We have our state legislators, but it's going to be our general counsel in those states that we need to target. Then we also got to look at our government relations teams, right? Who is it that you can work with and target to pass inclusive policies or fight against it? And this is where we work in with sign-on letters, member testimonies, right? Right now, member voice is the most important. Be able to tell your stories, show up at board meetings, show up at state meetings, whether it's in your email or your phone. I know members, and I do it myself, that on a certain time of every single day, I will have my email and I will have my phone set to dial my legislators to be able to tell them exactly what I think about these laws or policies that are being put forth for people to vote on. And we need our member stories. If there are small wins that are happening, if there are testimonies of what you're doing in your classroom, if what you're doing in your district, what you're doing in your communities, these are the movement of what we need to be able to move on. And then also look at policy and practice, right? School board resolutions, professional learning opportunities to not only better educate ourselves about what it is that our LGBTQ plus community needs, not only for our students, but for our educators. Because I firmly believe we cannot 100% support our LGBTQ students if we're not 110% supporting our LGBTQ educators. They're the ones that are going to be able to sacrifice themselves and put them on the forefront so our LGBTQ students can see what it is like to be an LGBTQ person in this world, right? And then also member engagement. We need to look at rallies. We need to look at marches. We need to look at petitions. We need to look at issue-based organizing. So when people hear the word organizing or campaigns, they automatically think politics, right? If I'm going to run on a campaign, but campaigns are also issue-based. So for instance, I'll use a story in Connecticut where the Stonington Education Association ran a campaign against the Board of Ed that decided that LGBTQ pride flags could not be present. So working with your UNISERV director, working with that local union, they were able to bring people and voices to the table. And after campaigning around why LGBTQ inclusivity is so important, they were able to get the school board to unanimously reverse their decision around LGBTQ inclusivity. So when we're thinking about those different approaches, there's an avenue where anybody and everybody can get involved. And I strongly believe, and when we think about organizing, it's looking at those that are your advocates. Right? There are going to be people that are willing to show up, that are willing to show that flag or stand in a parking lot and hold that sign. That's all well and good. Then we're going to have our mobilizers, right? They're the ones that you're always going to tap into, that are ready to show up and they're very prepared. But then you have your organizing component. Those are the individuals that are willing to take a risk. And I always ask when people sit there and say, what can I do? I want to be involved. I want to be a part of this. And the question is, what are you willing to risk, right? And if you can bring it all back to what is it all that we want the best for our students. So no matter who you are, whether it's red, purple, green, whatever affiliate that you belong to, and our marginalized communities as well are the ones that we have to have conversation with. At the end of the day, we want the best for all of our students. So if you can find that common ground and find those values that you agree upon, those are the things that are going to be able to move people. Those are the things that are going to help you move change and have fruitful conversations, because there is nobody that you talk to when you sit there and say, do you think all kids deserve the right to have a free and fruitful and strong public education? Everybody's going to say yes. But when you start asking the questions, is it only for some or for all? That's our entry point, because everybody will agree that we want safe, strong, and healthy public schools, safe public schools for all of our students. So think about the different avenues of where you can come in. And the biggest thing is that NEA has, and we've seen this, about 84% of all of the members that run for school board that are NEA members, we endorse and they win those elections, right? And so we need to think about the people that we want in these positions. We need to have the conversations and hold them on record about what their beliefs are and what their practices are, right? And so if you're in a school district or a state, especially when Trump's executive orders came out around eliminating DEI and having all of these book bans, so many people were just, let's comply, let's comply, let's comply, right? You need to take a step back. Even if your state was to go forward and comply, your target area is your school board. Pass a school board resolution that allows certain curriculum to continue to be taught, that allows pronouns to be able to be used in the classroom and students identify. Because right now we have a federal government that's very much overreaching their boundaries. And right now it's our state and local control that we as members of the association and anybody has a say in, right? And so that's when we organize and we mobilize around inclusive policies and target the areas that we know that we definitely have control.
Yeah, that's great. And really thorough and great advice. One of the things that stuck out that you said is, what are you willing to risk? And I think that's right now, particularly here in South Carolina, that is a calculus that a lot of folks are making right now, because there is this real culture of fear. And then that fear comes in a lot of different ways. One is my job going to be safe if I speak up? Am I going to be harassed online? If I come out, whether you come out or come out as an ally, am I going to, what kind of, feedback am I going to get? Am I going to be punished for that? Am I going to be harassed? I want to talk about, like, as a person who considers himself an ally, but is always seeking like better ways to be an ally. What are some of the top ways that folks who want to be an ally, but maybe they're afraid to be, like, what are some ways they can step into that allyship?
Absolutely. So when we're thinking about allies, there's always that conversation about what people are willing to do and how far you're willing to go, right? So we have allyship where people are willing to show up and share resources or talk to people. And then you have the co-conspirators, right? There's the co-conspirators that are willing to be on that pole when you're ready to jump over that fence, to be able to raise that flag. So when I think about allyship, and you're willing to show your support, at whatever level that's going to be. If you don't want your name attached to it, there's ways that we can do things silently, right? At NEA, we have the Opportunity Grows Here campaign. And what that is where if you Google it right now and typed in NEA Opportunity Grows Here, you can register to get 25 postcards that what you can do is fill out and send out to whether it's your principal, your school board member, your board of ed members, to sit there and say, hey, we believe in inclusive policies and we want you to make the right decision. Can you imagine if everybody on this call, and I don't see numbers, so I don't know how many people are on this presentation, but say there was 1,000 of you, and you then all requested those packets of those postcards, and you get 20 or it's 25 in each, and you all sent those to individuals that are in charge of making policies or in charge of listening to individuals when you have concerns, or have focus groups, or you have SOGI committees or caucus committees, and you send those out. That is sending a very, very strong message that even if your name is not attached to it, they're hearing your message. So whether you don't want to be on TV or you want to be on TV, whether you want to be in the school board that's being publicized and live recorded, and people can identify you or not. Think about where you are comfortable about taking that risk. If you want to be an individual that can sit there and name stamp and come up with messaging, I'm sure people have heard of We Make the Future. That is a tried and true messaging firm where we talk about race, class, gender narrative, right? Where you talk about our shared value, you name the villain, and then you come together at a core value. If we all could have aligned messaging, whether you're talking to parents, whether you're talking to friends, about why LGBTQ inclusivity is so important, because we know when one student has one caring adult, the suicide rate drops about 80%, 84%, right? So it's not so much of having to have your face or your name attached to things. It's thinking about the ways that you can get messaging out there to the people that we know that need to hear it. So find that avenue of where you're able to go. And most importantly, I think we often think that organizations, associations are going to be our champions. They're the ones that are going to do the work. Of course. Why do you think I'm here? Why do you think we spend hours and hours and I travel all over the country to talk to educators, to talk to our affiliates, to think about ways that we can target these anti-LGBTQ policies? But we also have to just think about how we can target our individual networks. Where is your sphere of control? Who are the people that you can constantly talk to, right? And have these conversations and educate yourself about this. We know every day a new decision is made, a new article comes out, and it can be exhausting to try to keep up with it. I can tell you on an average day, I probably get 4 or 5 hours of sleep because I'm constantly reading new decisions that are coming out. But we then have to take ownership. We also have to make sure that we're educating ourselves and having influence over our sphere of network, because when we're thinking about organizing, it's not just when people think about organizing in a union, it's about getting a new member, right? Organizing is around an issue. So if there's an issue that you're passionate about, you can coach people, you can mentor people around what it is that we need to do. So there are very advert ways that individuals get involved, but there are also silent ways that people can get involved. So we really need to think about what are our core values around the messaging around these issues that we know people will agree with.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to get, while I have this time with you, I wanted to ask you, like, this is kind of a different kind of question, but it's like, how did we get to where we are? It seems like in the Obergefell decision was about 10 years ago, like 2015, is that right? That gave folks the right to marry. I'm wondering, in your analysis of, and you're watching how things have played out since then, how did we get to this place where it feels like we're taking steps backward? What do you think contributed to that?
So I think accountability is something very important that we need to pay attention to, right? So whether it's our elected officials or whether it's our own personal accountability, we can read news stories. I was just reading one the other day where individuals around this big, beautiful bill that's being passed, where people are not even reading the bill and they're voting on it, right? We have to be very specific in the questions that we ask. We have to get people on record, right? We have to make sure that we're showing up and having those meetings and having those conversations. When you see, and it's all over the news, especially in these small rural areas in Texas, Alabama, where people are not showing up for town halls, that should be telling you something tried and true, right? That they're afraid. They're afraid of what they said that they would commit to, and now they're rallying back. Or there are these bills and policies that are being passed that these individuals don't know what the final and little details are about those policies. So it's when we think about parties, it's either the left or the right, or there's somewhere in between, right? But we have to look at and personalize these issues. It's coming to a point where we have an administration that wants dominance, right? That they want control, that they want a dictatorship, right? There's been those memes. There's been the comparison to the TV shows, the Netflix shows about a dictator coming into rule. But there is powers and numbers in us. We can't continue to think that somebody else is going to solve the problem for us. Once they know that individuals that are elected officials can sit there and tell us what we want to hear and think that that's it and everything is going to be okay, that's when I personally believe that's where we failed ourselves. That's where I need to make sure I'm asking the questions. That's when I need to make sure that I'm showing up at these meetings. That's when I need to make sure that I want this interview. That's when I want to make sure that when I give you these talking points, are you in agreement with this, right? When they sit there and say what they believe, and then when you compare them to their core values and you see a vast difference, we need to start questioning that. So thinking about movements, I mean, this is an old playbook, right? We could have, whether it's Donald Trump or we can have another Republican in office, and we could probably predict that some of these same things are going to be happening, but we always have to stay on the offense. We can't just say, okay, after this election, say we flip the House and we flip the Senate at midterms and we control it like, phew, everything is going to be okay. No, we constantly have to stay on top of our game. So when we had control of both for a short period of time under the previous administration, the other side, the other aisle, the other party, however we want to identify them, they flooded inbox, they flooded phone calls, right? They sent mailings, they had people showing up non-stop, right? And so when that pressure is on, what happens? People act. If all of a sudden we think, wow, we won this election, we're good for 4 years, then we're doing ourselves a failure. We can't just sit there and just because we get somebody elected that we think everything is going to be okay. We have to continue to have those conversations with them. We have to continue to have them show up. We have to continue to have them endorse things. We have to continue to have them show up at meetings and pass school board resolutions. We have to continue to hold them accountable to repeal certain things. So don't think just because an administration flips that everything's okay. There's accountability on our own selves to make sure that what we firmly believe in as unified parties, that we show up and we show out.
I agree with that. And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is how, like, so a lot of this has to do with who we elect, right? So who we elect, they're the ones who are going to either give us the policies that we want or not. And how do we get folks to go to the voting booth and vote for the right people? And a lot of this is sort of a battle over the mind. And what I'm wondering is, as we approach this work, I think there are some people, they're just beyond convincing. It might be a waste of time and resources to even reach out to them. But that when we're in online spaces, or you're at a meeting, or you're at your church, or you're in whatever social group you're in, and you're talking about these issues, and they've got this, misinformation, or this conflation of whatever they saw on X, or Twitter, used to be Twitter, or whatever they've heard from the administration, and they're kind of parroting it back. What have you found to be the most effective approach in trying to change minds of those who are, there's a potential there to change their mind? Like, what are the strategies?
So what's been proven is when you try to myth bust, all it does is perpetuate myths. So think about a post that somebody put on Facebook, right? That you disagree with, and you're like, oh my God, that's wrong. And you start trying to call people out on that. What happens? The issue at hand goes away. And what happens is people then just start arguing about the issue, about who's right and who's wrong. We have to try to stop myth busting, because the other party, the other side of the aisle right now, what they're doing is clickbait, right? I'm sure you saw the Valentine's Day post of what the White House posted, that if you come here illegally, we'll deport you, right? It's purposeful to get people a reaction out of them. They want to rise a reaction out of you, because when they do that, you're now paying attention to how awful that is. And so they can then pass or do things that you're not paying attention to, because you're so pissed off, you're so aggravated, I can't believe that they would do this. Your eye is off the prize, right? So what we have to do is just be very effective with our messaging. We have to just constantly share the facts. We don't want to sit there and get into these arguments, because once you get into those arguments, you go down a rabbit hole, and then the issue at hand is lost. Because if I post that comment, 4 hours later, I'm still battling with the 1 or 2, 3, 4 other people around that same issue. And I've lost the traction of the people that I could have brought onto my side. So when we think about that, you have to think about organizing. You have to find your network of individuals that really support the change that you want to make. And then you start tapping into those other individuals one by one, having those one-on-one conversations. Map out your community, map out your building to have these conversations. Share facts, but don't get into arguments, right? Be able to show the proof, but I'm not going to sit there and argue with you back and forth, because again, it's a form of clickbait. They do this purposely to put something out there to get people to respond and react, to distract you from what's really going on. So what we need to pay attention to is what's really going on, and refute that by just stating the facts, stating the obvious, putting out real life stories, sharing stories of self, stories of truth, teaching truth in our classrooms, because then that's what people are going to pay attention to. Because eventually they're going to be like, I'm tired of these arguments over here. There are always going to be the 5-10% that we're never going to change, right? It's that 85-10-5 rule. 85% are on board. There's 10% that we have room to have conversation with and change. And then there's going to be 5% that are probably just never going to change their mind. And that's okay. But as long as we can continue to teach and talk truth, that's the most important.
Yeah. And I think one of the issues I think a lot of folks are seeing right now is you'll see a baseball team or a hockey team or somebody celebrate Pride Month. And if you go and you look at the comments, invariably, you'll see, a lot of people in support, but then you see these people that just have the nastiest comments. And I think it's really hard when you see that kind of meanness and cruelty in the comments and hate to ignore it. But I do think there's a point that you're trying to make. It's like when you get bogged down in that, instead of just saying, hey, I really support this, great job, you're going after the person who's nasty. You're almost like kind of amplifying their message.
Absolutely. And that's what they want. That's what they want. They purposely will do that because they're getting a rise out of you. Let's be real. I've been called every gay slur ever. And if I let that continue to impact me, you and I would not be having this conversation right now, right? So I got to fuel that. There is hatred there. So how do I take that as fuel to be able to make sure that I'm putting out truth, right? And so that's what inspires me and should inspire others, that every time that hate comment comes out, we need to put a new fact that's
They
out
almost see it almost like they're fishing for engagement. And what we need to do is learn to just ignore it and instead put that positive message out there, the facts out there, and our love, our message of love out there. Something, and this isn't my own original thought, but it's just something I've read, I've thought of a lot about. I sometimes wonder, beyond just wanting to get the attention, I sometimes wonder if the folks who are protesting so much about Pride Month, if I mean, I don't know if there's any research on this, how many of them are actually just struggling with their own identity, or maybe it's not that they're struggling with their sexual identity or their gender identity, but that they're struggling with having been brought up not able to really be their authentic selves. So when they see other people freely embracing their authentic selves, that there's like this psychological discomfort, and it reminds them that for whatever reason they weren't allowed to be what they truly were meant to be. Is there any research on that? What are your thoughts on that?
So there's definitely research, and I can't rattle off stats on that right now, but you bring up a very, very valid point, and I can just use my own personal experience, right, to show a comparison, show an analogy. Somebody that grew up in a very rural area, saw pride events, saw things that were happening around me that I knew that I wanted to be a part of, but did not feel as if I had the sense of support or the community or educators that supported me, because LGBTQ was not something that was talked about, right? So even if you take LGBTQ out of it, think about something that you just believe in or something that you like, right? And you're always constantly like, how can you like that flavor of pizza? Or how can you believe in something like that? When you constantly have that around you, what does that cause you to do, right? You suppress all of that, right? Things become in your subconscious that it just lives there and you can't act on it. And then when you finally see those environments where you can thrive in doing that, nobody's ever taught you or helped you deal with what it is that you would have to overcome to be able to be in that environment, right? How do I have these conversations with the people that never believed that, right? How do I have the conversations with friends that never thought that I would like this, or that I believed in this, or that I was capable of this, right? So we constantly have conversations about finding your networks and being connected with those people that are around you. But for people that had to suppress that for so long, they don't know how to then have that connection and how to have that relationship. So that's where we need those wraparound services, right? That's where mental health is a real thing. And right. Mental health just has a stigma on it, but mental health means everything. Your emotions, how do you communicate, right? Your own belief system. How do you look at yourself in the mirror and believe in who you really are, right? So when there is something that's been ingrained in you not to do, and then you finally have the courage that I want to do it, of course there's going to be a lot of emotion. Not only is it because you're ready to take that step, but even if you're personally and mentally ready to do it, knowing the backlash that you're going to feel, it's going to cause you, and it causes some not to do it anymore. So what do, right? You reflect, you deflect, you push that on somebody else, you push that on a larger community. So I think we really need to take a step back and think about, not only is it the support of people like, yes, I'm ready, and they're ready to go the football field and do it, and they're capable. But what about that population, like you just said, where they divert to anger, right? Or they divert to putting a nasty post, or they divert to bullying, right? If it's mean, we need to intervene, and we need to find ways to have those conversations and be able to intersect those behaviors, because I think there's a population of individuals that need that, but they don't know how to vocalize that. They don't know how to be able to ask for that. And I think that's where we need to start.
Yeah, excellent. Another question I had for you is, a lot of educators now are being told they have to take the pride flag out of their classroom because that's political. And what I would say is that it's a political to say you've got to take it out. That whatever decision you're making around that, whether you're going to allow for a welcoming and inclusive environment for all educators and students, or whether you're going to say it needs to be sanitized of any kind of welcoming message and inclusive message for people, that's also a political statement. So what are your thoughts on that? And what would you say to an educator who's been asked to not wear a rainbow button or have a rainbow flag or whatever? I know that may vary from state to state or district to district, but sort of what is your pushback on the idea that that's inserting politics into the classroom?
Yes. So, I mean, whether it's this administration, a previous administration, or 10 administrations down the road, right? There's always going to be a target on some group of people, particularly our marginalized groups, right? And so what it is when we have this ability to be our true authentic, people feel threatened, right? It's, you're allowing this, but what are you allowing me? You got to start thinking about privilege, right? I'm a white cisgender man, but I so happen to be LGBTQ, right? If LGBTQ wasn't part of that, my identity, then things of what I can say and do are going to be that much easier. So when people that have been suppressed and oppressed for so long that now want to be able to identify who they are, what their history is, the history that got us to where we are as human beings today, that moved movements, civil rights, we can go on and on and on. Once those identities and lives and beliefs start to become alive, people start to get afraid. So first and foremost, as an educator, I come to you today as an educator by means of NEA. First and foremost, follow any policy that's in place, right? We do not want you, as much as we want to sometimes stand up against this policy and say, you know what, even if I wear this pin, I know I'm going to lose my job. We don't want you to lose your job, right? We respect your bravery, but we do not want you to go against a policy that we know that is wrong, to then sacrifice who you are and what you're working towards, right? Again, this is when you need to organize around that issue, right? You need to be vocal. You need to find the times. If it's between 7 and 2, that's your contractual hours, but when you're off that campus and you can have meetings and you can talk to people and you can host those groups. When we think about the gender sexual alliances that we can have, right? Like that's all protected under the Equal Access Act, right? So find the ways that you can still have these conversations and these entry points, but I would never advise anybody, whether it's a school board policy, your individual building policy, your state policy, or a law that was passed, that if you can't do it, don't do it to sacrifice the position of your job. I know people will say, take it to the streets. There are ways that we can take it to the streets, right? But as much of, if I was in a building and my principal said, Anthony, you can no longer wear pronouns, it's a school board policy, as much as I would disagree with that, for the protection of my job, to know that my students know that I'm still going to be there for them, I would not wear that pin, but I would find the different avenues to still be able to have those connections with the individuals that are around me. And then again, that's when you have to rally, you have to mobilize, and you have to organize the individuals. Look at what happened with the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, right? That we defeated that bill. Educators came out, community members came out, parents came out, students came out, right? You can say gay. There are stipulations of what can be taught, but what was once across the board is no longer across the board, right? And that comes from organizing. That comes from being able to rally those that believe in the right thing to be able to come together. And what that looks like for an individual is going to vary. but I'm not going to sit there and tell an advocate who's willing to stand outside with a sign, no, don't do that. We need you in the room. I could have 150 people in a room and I can have 3,000 people outside. That's going to make a big difference if I only had 150 people in the room and just told people hanging a sign outside that that's not good enough, right? So whether the law we agree with or not, this is where we have to look at what are we going to do to make sure that I am still present and I am still relevant to those kiddos that are standing in front of me, that even though a policy that your principal, your superintendent might know is wrong and they morally believe that it's wrong, but it's passed because of funding. But look at the cases, look at Maine, right? They threatened to withhold their funding and she brought them to court and they won that decision, right? Appropriated funds. Things are constantly going to be challenged. I hate to say that sometimes when a decision is made that we have to wait. Sometimes we do have to wait, but there is no reason why that you can still not show your allyship and supporting other individuals by different means.
One of the things that I've heard some LGBTQ educators get frustrated about is, when I was in the classroom, married with children, I can wear a wedding ring. I can have a picture of my, wife and myself and my kids. And, you have homecoming queen and king, and you have, prom, all these things that are sort of heteronormative. Like I think you mentioned something that's important is people not understanding their privilege, not understanding that they're already immersed in it. Like the whole system is set up in a heteronormative way where it's totally fine. Like nobody who's heterosexual or cisgender has to really worry about these issues. But if you're not, then all of a sudden there's this like constant shadow of like, am I allowed to say if I'm a woman, to say I have a wife? Am I allowed to, refer to myself as they, them? Like there's a lot of things where it almost like forces people to erase that part of themselves. And you could see that in the early parts of my career. I've been teaching since 1995. In the early parts of my career, you saw so many people that were clearly living in fear and did not want that part of their lives discussed or open at all. And until we get to that world where those folks feel as safe and as included as I felt, that's like, to me, why we're celebrating Pride. Like people ask, well, why do we have to celebrate that? And it's like, of course, we have to continue to celebrate that until we get to that world where, to me, those educators feel safe. But the question I have for you is, because you mentioned this earlier about why it's so important to take care of our LGBTQ educators is because it's directly tied to taking care of LGBTQ students. And can you talk a little bit about the statistics and why this is a moral imperative for us to have inclusive schools, and to use pronouns and to ensure that those students and educators feel welcome and safe?
So there's a lot there. In general, representation just matters, right? Representation, no matter what it is, will always matter. I was an educator that was not out. I was an educator that was outed, right? And so whether it's LGBTQ, whether it's a belief system, whether it's we're Black or brown, whether we are Asian, Hispanic, Two-Spirit, representation matters. And soon as we start to take away representation, that's when there's a sense of I don't belong. There's a sense that I am not valued. Right. So even if I was an LGBTQ educator and I was told you can't have a picture of your spouse on your table anymore, you cannot talk about your private life, I need to think about ways that I can still bring in representation, right? As an educator, I know that I've taken that oath to be able to serve my students and bring the best possible education ever. In the past year, 39% of LGBTQ youth people seriously considered suicide. Over 1 in 10 LGBTQ young people attempted suicide in the past year, while 1 in 5 transgender and non-binary youth did so, right? And so there's a range of factors in regards to access, home supportiveness, being represented in our curriculum, in our buildings, being able to have that one confidant, that one believer in us. And so sometimes when I think about my own self in the building that I used to taught, I knew that I was sacrificing myself and my representation, but still finding ways to have conversation with my kiddos without having to specifically identify LGBTQ. Yes. Does it hurt? Did it bother me? Yes. But were there ways that I could talk about and have them write papers and have them do assignments around acceptance? I know the words diversity, equity, inclusion are sitting there saying that they're woke, right? Well, if we weren't woke, then these individuals wouldn't be coming after us for being woke, right? This is real stuff, right? However you want to define what DEI is, if this person was a DEI hire, which is just, to me, just absolutely disgusting. It's a slur. It's offensive when you call somebody by that. But at the end of the day, it is these qualities of individuals that are what we want, right? And it is ways that through our curriculum, through our teachings, through the opportunities that we need to be able to continue to provide for them. So if you're not allowed to say LGBTQ in the classroom, if you're not allowed to wear your wedding band, which, right now is not, I know that the federal judge in Texas around Bostock and the interpretation of that's going to be challenged, because right now, even with the EEOC, they don't have quorum to be able to push through these new guidelines. And that's a whole nother kind of alley that they're going to challenge. But we have to be creative in the way that we continue to provide these opportunities. But at the same time, we cannot be afraid to teach and tell truth, right? We're going to come under backfire. Since the Pride movement, since the LGBTQ movement, this is not this is not a new game. This is not a new playing card. This is something that's going to happen over and over and over again. And so whether or not you can get it in that classroom, whether or not you as an educator can get the support that you need in those four walls, there are individuals beyond those four walls that you can continue to reach out to. There are those organizations that you're going to need to be able to support. So this is why it's so important to network. We can't think that we're just going to be able to do this alone, right? The whole saying, it gets better. It doesn't get better unless we put in that effort. If we're the ones that are going to do that homework, just like every educator, when we're grading papers, when they're saying, oh, educators make too much money and you get the summers off, right? We're doing the research. We're making the connections. We're having conversations with people to be able to connect our students with somebody. We also have to do that for ourselves as those educators, right? We have to find that network. So I know when new policies come into effect that it's a hard hit. I hear it. I talk to educators. I talk to kiddos that talk about how they used to be able to read this book, or they can't find this book in this library. But that is just that one space. Continue to find the spaces that embrace you, because that's what's going to continue to give you the fuel.
Yeah, excellent. I always ask this at the end. What have we not covered that you'd like to talk about and share with folks who are watching tonight?
Wow, I feel like we could go on and on and on. I'm passionate about this. This is something that I devote my life to now and sacrifice a lot, but I know that it's for the betterment of all of us. I think what people have to do is find the intersections of the issues that impact all marginalized groups, right? We have to find those intersections. If we're working in silos, that means we're also working towards sometimes similar goals, but at the same time, we may be running down two separate hallways with a wall in between us with no opportunities to talk. Once we can break down those barriers and create bridges between these intersections, that's when we're going to be able to unite together, right? That's when we're going to be able to have those critical conversations. That's who is hurting here, who is getting the advantage here, who are the people that are missing at this table. So if we can find the intersections of these issues to show, I mean, we can talk about any of the new policies or the executive orders that are going to come out. It may sit there, this big, beautiful bill that we can go through that fine tooth comb, right? I'm halfway through that, and I can sit there and tell you all the different populations, all the different marginalized groups that's going to intersect. If we keep them marginalized and not recognize the intersections of how this is going to have a snowball effect, we're not going to be able to make those movements. We know that marginalized groups have different identities that are going to be attacked, right? But we have to find the commonalities to be able to come together and create coalitions to be able to fight for things that we know that are going to benefit all groups, but at the same time, keeping our lane and looking at the zones that we also need to keep in mind of the different specificities, the different policies and laws that will impact me individually. But if we do not bridge those intersections, we're going to continue to run down hallways, and there's going to be a wall between us, and we're not going to be able to succeed as far as we need to go.
Yeah. I think that solidarity is such an important concept.
Absolutely.
Here. Like
Absolutely.
Where if it may not something may not impact you directly, but there is this connection. Like if you allow injustice to happen, I think it was Martin Luther King said, anywhere, you're just promoting injustice everywhere. And it's like, it's only a matter before it's on your doorstep or impacts somebody that you love and care about. Yeah. So this is why I think that point of intersectionality is so important, of seeing the connection between someone else's marginalization and the potential for it to come again to your doorstep at some point. But even if you don't even see that connection, just to have that empathy and to realize that somebody else should not have to live in fear, that everybody else should live with the same kind of rights and feel welcome and safe just the way you do. It's just, to me, just a human. And
we can't sit on the sidelines anymore, right? We can't think that this one team is going to conquer it for all of us, right? We have to join teams. We have to build bigger coalitions. And one thing that I challenge people, and a dear colleague of mine that I respect, I don't want to name drop, but this activity that we do, whether it's in our trainings or having conversations, and I challenge people to do this with their superintendents, their school board members. Go to your House of Reps, go to your state legislator, have a conversation with your congressman. Take a piece of paper and write down all these different core values, whether it's integrity, solidarity, truth. Have a list of it, right? And go in there and say, you were my congressman, and I would ask you to sit down and say, hey, circle your top 5 core values. And they circle it. And then you tell them to narrow it down to 3, to 2, to 1. And then you have a conversation about what I circled and what you circled, right? And even if there are different core values, there's going to be some type of connection. And then say one was equity or equality, and then they just signed a bill, or they're ready to pull a bill up, or they're like, Anthony, what's your input on this bill? And you know that it's not going to support the work that you're doing. Ask them how they can stand behind that core value and sign that bill. Right? Because then that opens the door to conversation. That is then what opens the door to say, if this is what you believe in, but this is what you're supporting, or this is what you're advocating for, but this is not what your constituency believes in, and this is not what the people voted for you, it is a game changer. It changes hearts, it changes minds, and it really gets people to think. So when there are these phone calls that you have an opportunity to call, or these town halls, pressure them, ask them those questions, because as you can see in the news, and I know not in many places they want to show it, they're not showing up to town halls, they're being held accountable, and we got to continue to do that. But if we can come together around our core shared values, that's what's going to help move things. And we got to continue to teach the truth. We got to continue to say it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Anthony. This is a wonderful conversation. I know you've had a long day and you work tirelessly for social justice. And I just want to say thank you for what you do. I'm sure that it's been really challenging, especially this year. But thank you for what you do. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. And one thing I'm just, I think I have access to the chat, right? Can I drop things in the chat, or does it go to private?
Well, if it goes to private, I can copy it over for sure.
Yeah. So one thing for people that are educators and community members, if you want to continue to know what's happening, we have our Ed Action Center where you can look at our issues that we're facing and ways to be able to contact your senators and the House of Reps. And also to protect our public school, I want people to be involved around our public education and why it's so important to know the facts of what's happening. There's another link. And for educators that might be facing school districts or school boards that might be, mending to policies that are coming out or afraid. Look at the universities, right? We can go on and on about people backing down. We have our NEA campaign lab where members of the association can come together and fight around an issue, and you get support, you get a coach. And I'm a coach in the campaign lab where you identify an issue and you identify the members that you want. You develop a campaign lab, a campaign plan, you organize, you mobilize, and we give you those supports. So NEA, for all the members of the association, there are so many supports that we can give you, along with our See Educators Run campaign, where if you want to run for office, you want to run for school board, we have members that run all the time. We have our first LGBTQ educator out in California. That was the first ever open LGBTQ educator to win a school board seat in California. So we're here from you. We're here for you. If there are resources, if there are questions, I'm sure my information can be shared, but I'll also share it in the chat. I'm more than willing to answer questions, have additional conversations, and connect you with the people that you need to. But your state affiliates, your locals, keep fighting. And if there's ways that we can help, I'm always here.
Thank you so much. I shared all those links. So if anybody who's watching wants to reach out to Anthony, it's Brisson at NEA.org. And I've got all those other links as well. Thank you so much again, Anthony. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care. All right, everybody. That was Anthony Brisson from NEA. Thanks so much to him for his time tonight. I wanted to make sure you check into the comments on Facebook. If you're watching, or if you're watching on YouTube, look in the comments on Facebook for the links that Anthony shared, including his email address, if you have comments or questions. And Cool has a website dedicated to LGBTQ issues. In fact, Anthony just shared another link for us to share. I'm going to share that. But the website for our resources is cool.us/LGBTQ. Your rights under Bostock and your student rights are there, as well as some links to NEA resources and all of the live streams that we've done and the articles that we've written that are related to this particular topic. You can find those on our website. Would also like to just promote a couple of other things. One is if you'd like to learn more about yoga, we have Cool Yoga. You can go to cool.us/yoga. Alex Del Castillo operates this, does it every Wednesday night. So he's probably doing it tonight. He's probably done a new episode tonight. So check that out. Those are free resources. And for folks trying to pass the praxis, they can go to cool.us/praxis. I'll put that website up there. And you can get free resources to help you pass the test if you are struggling or think you might struggle with it. And even if you don't, it's just a good resource for you to prepare to take the praxis exam. I want to thank again Anthony Brisson for being with us tonight, and want to again wish everybody a happy Pride Month. I hope that everybody out there celebrates, and that one day we just have a world where we're totally inclusive, and we don't have to worry and live in fear, and we can eliminate hate. But until then, we need to stick together. And as Anthony said, have solidarity and support each other and act and mobilize and organize and act together to try to protect LGBTQ educators and students. So appreciate that. This will be the last live stream we have. I'll be facilitating retreats this summer, and we'll also be at a summer leadership for the SCEA next week. So we probably won't have another live stream for a couple of months, but want to wish everybody a great end to the school year if you're ending your school year this week. And hope you have an incredible summer. Take some time off for yourself, practice self-care, invest in your wellness, and know that Cool has a host of resources to help you do that. Just go to cool.us and you can find a bunch of resources, including information on yoga and mindfulness and nutrition and all kinds of wellness initiatives. Thanks again, Anthony, and thank you for tuning in. Thanks to Teddy for watching, and we'll see you sometime soon.
Together we learn, together we grow, together we heal, together we flow. Be cool, every teacher, every school. Be cool,